In this video, I'm going to talk about how Australia won 3 consecutive World Cups between 1999 and 2007. Now, I must start in 1996 for some context. In the 1996 World Cup, Australia finished second in their group, losing only one match. In the quarterfinal, they beat New Zealand, and in the semifinal, they beat the West Indies. Now, in the final, they played against Sri Lanka, and they were thoroughly outplayed. They lost the match by 7 wickets, and many players who play an important role in future World Cup wins struggled on that day, namely Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath, and Ricky Ponting. It seems they really took this loss to heart, because they'd make the cricketing world pay for it in the next decade or so. Now, coming into the 1999 World Cup, Australia were in some mixed form. They won a tri-series they hosted with England and Sri Lanka at home, and they played a 7-match series in the West Indies in March-April of 1999, and they drew that series 3-3. Notable new additions to Australia's batting lineup were Adam Gilchrist, Damien Martyn, and Darren Lehmann. As for the bowling attack, it remained mostly the same, with Damien Fleming, Paul Reiffel, and Glenn McGrath as the pacers, while Shane Warne would be the lone spinner. Australia's 1999 World Cup campaign would start on May 16th. Their first opposition would be Scotland, and as expected, Australia would win easily, by 6 wickets. Their first tough match was 4 days later, against New Zealand. Darren Lehmann would top score for Australia, scoring 74 runs, but 4 wickets from New Zealand left-arm pacer Jeff Allett would keep Australia to a below-par 213 for 8. In the chase, Australia had New Zealand struggling at 49 for 4, but a 148-run partnership between Chris Cairns and Roger Toos would secure New Zealand a 5-wicket win.
Oh, beautifully hit. That's hit like a rocket. That's a good shot to finish it. Roger Toos.
Australia's next match was against Pakistan. 50s from Inzamam ul Haq as well as Abdul Razak, plus a cameo from Moeen Khan, would take Pakistan to 275 for 8 in their 50 overs. During the chase, many Australian batsmen would make starts, but none of them would kick on to a 50-plus score. Ultimately, 4 wickets from Wasim Akram, 2 of them being in the final over, meant that Australia fell short of the target by 10 runs. With 2 losses in 3 matches, it wasn't looking good for Australia. Australia's next match was against Bangladesh. Australia won this match easily, as expected. They chased down a 178-run target in just 20 overs. Australia's last group stage match was against the West Indies. The West Indies were on 6 points, while Australia had just 4 points. West Indies also had the better net run rate. This meant that not only did Australia need to win, they needed to win by a big enough margin to ensure that they would qualify for the Super 6 stage. And they would do just that. Glenn McGrath would run through the West Indies batting order, taking 5 for 14. Shane Warne also chipped in with 3 wickets of his own, and West Indies were all out for just 110. With such a small score, Australia had 47 overs to chase down to target, ensuring that they would qualify for the Super 6 stage. Curly Ambrose gave them a bit of a scare at the start, but eventually Australia would slowly but surely chase down target in 40 overs, qualifying for the Super 6 stage. While Australia did manage to qualify for the Super 6 stage of the World Cup, they lost to both Pakistan and New Zealand, the 2 other teams who would progress to the Super 6 stage from their group, meaning that 0 points would carry over for them. They'd start in the Super 6 stage with a clean slate, realistically meaning that they had to win all 3 of their Super 6 stage matches to stand any chance of qualifying for the semifinals. Their first Super 6 match took place against India. 83 from Mark Woe, as well as cameos from other batsmen, would take Australia to 282 for 6 in their 50 overs. 3 top-order wickets from Glenn McGrath would lay the platform for Australia to bowl out India for just 205. Australia would win the match by 77 runs. Their second Super 6 match took place against Zimbabwe. A century from Mark Woe, as well as a 50 from Steve Woe, would take Australia to 303 for 4 in their 50 overs. Australia did not bowl particularly well. However, the target was big enough that Australia would chip away at wickets every now and then, and Zimbabwe were not able to score the 304 runs required, even though they did bat all 50 overs. Going into their final Super 6 match, Australia found themselves outside of the top 4 that would qualify for the semifinals. Australia were on 4 points and would need a win in this match to secure a spot in the semifinal. Their final Super 6 match was against South Africa. A century from Herschel Gibbs, as well as a cameo from Lance Klusener, would take South Africa to 271 for 7 in their 50 overs. In reply, Ponting scored 69, and Steve Woe would score 120 not out after being oddly dropped by Herschel Gibbs to secure Australia the win by 5 wickets and a spot in the semi-final of the 1999 World Cup.
I don't believe it. 1 to win, 3 balls to go. And that's it. Australia have won a vital match, which has ensured that they will go through to the semi-finals.
Now, the semi-final also took place against South Africa again, just 4 days after they'd played previously in the Super 6 stage. Honestly, this match deserves a video of its own, but I'll try my best to summarize it. Australia batted first. Top order wickets from Alan Donald and Sean Pollock would have Australia struggling at 68 for 4. Steve Waugh and Michael Bevan would put on a 90-run partnership before Sean Pollock came back into the attack and broke the partnership. He actually took 2 wickets in that over. From here, Sean Pollock and Alan Donald would clean up the rest of the tail, sharing 9 wickets between them. Australia would be all out for 213. In reply, South Africa's openers, Herschel Gibbs and Gary Kirsten, would give them a good steady start. South Africa were 48 for none after 12 overs when Shane Warne would enter the attack and change the game on its head.
From the City end.
Always bowling. What an absolutely brilliant delivery. Drifts in, the Gatting delivery actually drifted down the leg side to make it even more unplayable. In fact, that did land short of the road. And there's another one. And there's another one, Cronje.
Shane Warne would take 3 wickets and 8 balls with some beautiful deliveries and completely change the game. Jacques Kallis and Jonty Rhodes would put on a good partnership before wickets started to fall again. Eventually, South Africa needed 9 runs from the final over to win. Lance Klusener smashed the first 2 balls of the final over for 4. Scores were level, and South Africa now just needed 1 run off 4 balls to secure their spot in the World Cup final. Australia still had hope though, as South Africa were 9 wickets down, and a tie was all that they needed since Australia placed higher than South Africa in the Super 6 stage. The next ball would be a dot ball with Alan Donald almost being run out at the non-striker's end. On the next ball, Lance Klusener would strike the ball towards mid-off and take off for a run, while Alan Donald would not. The miscommunication resulted in Alan Donald being run out. As a result, the match would be a tie, but a tie was enough for Australia to book their spot in the World Cup final. While Australia's semi-final was a blockbuster, the final was very anticlimactic. Pakistan batted first and never really got going. McGraw, Fleming, and Moody would take top-order wickets, and then Warne would come into the attack and continue where he left off in the semi-final. He cleaned up the middle order and the tail, finishing with 4 wickets. Pakistan were all out for just 132. In the chase, Gilchrist would score a quick 50, and then cameos from Ricky Ponting and Mark Woe would ensure that Australia easily chased down the target by 8 wickets, winning the World Cup. Australia lifted the World Cup after having their backs against the wall midway through the group stage. Steve Waugh was Australia's highest run scorer, scoring 398 runs. He scored vital runs in the Super 6 game and the semi-final, both against South Africa. Shane Warne was Australia's highest wicket taker with 20 wickets, 8 of which came in the semi-final and the final. After losing 2 of their first 3 matches, Australia would not lose a single game after that en route to lifting the World Cup. Now, some may say that Australia weren't necessarily the actual best team in this tournament, arguing that maybe South Africa or Pakistan were better, but Australia had the quality of always being able to hold their nerve during pressure situations, and that's what wins you tournaments. That ability to hold your nerve under pressure was something that both South Africa and Pakistan were lacking. That is how Australia won the 1999 Cricket World Cup. Heading into the 2003 Cricket World Cup, Australia would again win a tri-series they hosted between England and Sri Lanka. The 2003 team would be led by Ricky Ponting, as Steve Waugh retired a year prior. As for the squad, Australia would move on from players like Paul Rifle, Damien Fleming, and Tom Moody. New additions to the team would be Brett Lee, Jason Gillespie, Matthew Hayden, and Andrew Symonds. A day before the World Cup started, Australia were dealt a shocking blow when Shane Warne tested positive for a banned substance. The substance was a diuretic pill his mother supposedly gave him to make him look better. Regardless of whether that's true or not, Shane Warne was sent home and banned for a year. Brad Hogg would replace him in the squad. The first match of the tournament took place against Pakistan. Initially, Australia were in trouble when Wasim Akram took 3 top-order wickets. Australia were at 146 for 5, looking like they may be bowled out for a low total. But a special innings from Andrew Symonds would take them to an above-par score of 310 for 8. Symonds scored 143 not out off just 110 balls. With the bat, Pakistan never really got going. There were many starts from their batsmen, but Australia would keep chipping away with wickets, and eventually the target proved to be too big, as Pakistan were bowled out for just 228. Australia's second match was against India. Brett Lee and Jason Gillespie ripped through the Indian batting order, taking 3 wickets each. India could only manage 125 runs before they were bowled out. Sachin Tendulkar top scored with 36 runs. Australia chased down the target, losing only 1 wicket. A comprehensive victory for Australia, and they started this World Cup in much better fashion compared to 4 years prior. Australia's next 3 games were against the Netherlands, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. As expected, Australia would win all 3 matches convincingly. A notable performance from one of these matches is the match against Namibia, where Glenn McGrath would take 7 wickets for 15 runs, which to this day is still the record for the best bowling figures in a World Cup game. With 5 wins in 5 games, Australia were already qualified for the Super 6 stage when they went up against rival England in the final group stage match. England actually got off to a pretty good start, but Andy Bickle, who was playing as a replacement for Jason Gillespie, would come into the attack and change the game. He ran through England's batting lineup with some beautiful deliveries, finishing with 7 wickets for 20 runs in the end, as England could only manage 204 for 8 in their 50 overs. In reply, Australia would actually find themselves struggling at 48 for 4 after Andrew Caddick took 4 top-order wickets. After a brief partnership between Darren Lehmann and Michael Bevan, Australia would again start to lose wickets. At this point, they were 135 for 8, with their chances of a win looking very bleak. But as he had done so many times in the past, Michael Bevan would guide Australia to a 2-wicket win, with Andrew Bickle assisting him at the other end, scoring 34 not out, along with his 7 wickets. Obviously, he was the man of the match. So, just like that, Australia would finish the group stage of the 2003 World Cup undefeated. This meant that they carried 12 points through to the Super 6 stage. In their first Super 6 match, they would take on Sri Lanka. Ricky Ponting would take a century, which would propel them to a score of 319 for 5 in 50 overs. During the chase, Brett Lee would rip through Sri Lanka's batting order with his brutal pace. Australia would end up winning the match by 96 runs. Australia's second Super 6 match took place against New Zealand. Shane Bond ripped through Australia's batting lineup, taking 6 for 23. In one of the classic World Cup spells. Australia were reeling at 84 for 7, but again, the partnership of Michael Bevan and Andrew Bickle would take Australia to a respectable total of 208 for 9 in 50 overs. Both batsmen would end up scoring 50s. During the chase, McGrath took care of the top order, while Brett Lee would clean up the tail in brutal fashion, finishing with 5 for 42. Australia won the match by 96 runs after staring down the barrel of defeat. Australia were a bit like the Undertaker in this World Cup. Just when you'd thrown everything at them, all your offense, and you thought you had them down, they would just sit back up and win the match anyways. They showed this ability in this match against New Zealand, the match against England, and to a lesser extent the match against Pakistan as well. In their last Super 6 match against Kenya, Brett Lee would take a hat-trick, and Kenya would only be able to manage 174 for 8 in their 50 overs. At one point, Australia were in some trouble during the chase at 117 for 5. This was due to left-arm spinner Asif Karim taking 3 for 7 in 8 overs. Australia would slowly but surely reach the target though, winning by 5 wickets. Still undefeated in the tournament, Australia would qualify for the semi-final. They played it against Sri Lanka. Australia would struggle with the bat due to tight bowling from Chaminda Vaas, Sanath Jayasuriya, and Aravinda De Silva. However, they would still manage a respectable 212 for 7, courtesy 91 not out from Andrew Symonds. Just like the Super 6 game between the two teams, Brett Lee would run through Sri Lanka's batting lineup. Sri Lanka were going nowhere at 123 for 7 after 38 overs, when the match would be settled on Duckworth Lewis due to rain. Australia won the match by 48 runs and progressed to the World Cup final. The final was to be played against India. Australia batted first and got off to a great start due to a fast 50 from Gilchrist. The openers put on a 100-run partnership, but were both dismissed by the time the score was at 125. From there, Ponting and Martin would put on a 234-run unbeaten partnership, decimating India's bowling lineup.
There he goes again, the result the same, this is even bigger.
Lovely shot that one. Gee, that is a great shot. Full toss, and he's hit that very well again. Wow, that is a huge hit. That is absolutely enormous. Just over the top of Vashishneer, and that's running away for a boundary to finish proceedings.
Ponting ended up on 140 not out, while Damien Martin scored 88 not out, and Australia finished their 50 overs scoring a massive 359 for 2. If India had any hope, that hope rested on Sachin Tendulkar's shoulders. A billion hearts must have broken though when he was dismissed by McGrath in the first over of the chase. Australia would keep chipping away with wickets, and the total was far too great for India. Australia would win yet another final in brutal fashion, this time by 125 runs.
That's another one. That's in the air, should be taken. The World Cup for Australia.
Well, they've put a lot of work into that, and they've played extremely well all the way through.
If there were any doubts as to who was the best team in the 1999 World Cup, Australia made sure there would be no doubts in 2003. Australia won the World Cup undefeated. There were some scares, however, Australia's uncountable amount of match winners ensured that they always found a way to win in the end. Ricky Ponting would top score for Australia with 415 runs. Gilchrist would follow closely with 408 runs. Brett Lee was Australia's highest wicket taker, taking 22 wickets, with Glenn McGrath following closely, taking 21 wickets. That is how Australia won the 2003 Cricket World Cup. Heading into the 2007 Cricket World Cup, Australia were in some mixed form. They did win the Champions Trophy in the fall of 2006. However, they didn't win a tri-series they hosted, including New Zealand and England. That series was in January of 2007, and they were also whitewashed by New Zealand in February of 2007. The feeling by many at the time was that Australia were not favourites for this World Cup. These feelings may have been misguided though, as many key players did not play those series for Australia. As for the squad, Australia were dealt a massive blow as Brett Lee would miss out on the tournament due to an injury. Shaun Tait would be his replacement. Other new additions to the squad would be Michael Clarke, Nathan Bracken, Michael Hussey, and Shane Watson. Australia would be led by Ricky Ponting again, and veterans like Matthew Hayden, Adam Gilchrist, and Glenn McGrath would be a part of the squad. Australia would win their first two group matches comprehensively. These matches were against Scotland and the Netherlands. In both matches, Australia would score over 300 runs and bowl out the opposition for less than 150. This was already enough for them to qualify for the Super 8 stage of the World Cup. In their final group stage match, they would defeat South Africa. Australia would score a massive 377 for 6 due to a century from Matthew Hayden as well as 90s from Michael Clarke and Ricky Ponting. In the chase, South Africa actually started pretty well. The openers, Graham Smith and A.B. de Villiers, had South Africa at 160 after 21 overs, before A.B. de Villiers was run out. From there, South Africa were not really able to form a single stable partnership, and the target would prove to be too large, as South Africa were bowled out for 294. So, Australia again finished the group stage undefeated, although this one was only 3 matches. They would carry through the result against South Africa into the Super 6 stage. The domination continued in the Super 8 stage though. Their first match was against the West Indies. Matthew Hayden would score 158 runs, which would propel Australia to 322 for 6. All the Australian bowlers chipped in to bowl the West Indies out for just 219. Next up was a rain-shortened match against Bangladesh. Bangladesh could only manage 104 for 6 in the now 22 over innings. Australia would chase down this target in just 14 overs, without losing a single wicket. Their next match was against rival England. Bracken, Tait, and McGrath would take 3 wickets each, limiting England's scoring opportunities. However, a century from Kevin Peterson would still take them to 247 all out. A 50 from Michael Clarke, as well as smaller contributions from other batsmen, would ensure that Australia won the match comfortably, chasing it down by 7 wickets with a couple of overs to spare.
Fantastic stroke. Clarke goes over the top, he goes well.
There it is. Well, that will do it.
In their next game, McGrath and Tait would destroy Ireland's batting order, allowing them to score only 91 runs before they were all out. Again, Australia chased down the target with ease, winning by 9 wickets. With 4 wins in 4 Super 8 games, Australia found themselves on 10 points, was already enough for them to qualify for the semi-finals. Their next match was against Sri Lanka. Again, Bracken, Tait, and McGrath would take care of the opposition's batting lineup. Bracken would be the best of the 3, taking 4 for 19 in his 10 overs. Sri Lanka were bowled out for just 226. 50s from Ponting and Simons would secure a 7-wicket win for Australia.
Ponting finishes the game with a massive 6.
In their final Super 8 game, Australia would destroy New Zealand. Matthew Hayden scored yet another century, and 50s from Ponting and Watson would take Australia to a massive 348 for 6. Brad Hogg would be the best of the Australian bowlers, taking 4 wickets, while Australia would bowl out New Zealand for just 133, winning the match by 225 runs. Undefeated in the tournament so far, Australia would take on South Africa in the semi-final. Yet again, the trio of Bracken, Tait, and McGrath would make easy work of the opposition's batting order. Shaun Tait was the best of the 3, taking 4 for 39. This as South Africa were bowled out for just 149. Michael Clarke would guide Australia's chase, scoring 60 not out, ensuring they qualified for a 4th consecutive World Cup final, with a chance to secure a hat-trick of World Cups.
Andrew Simons wins it for Australia. 28 matches unbeaten in World Cup cricket, and a 3rd consecutive chance of the World Cup trophy.
This time around, the final was against Sri Lanka, the same team who denied them 11 years prior to start this whole journey. The match would be shortened to 38 overs from the start due to rain. Adam Gilchrist would score a brutal 149 runs off just 104 deliveries. Cameos from Ponting and Simons would take Australia to 281 for 4 in just 38 overs. Nathan Bracken would strike early, then Sanath Jayasuriya and Kumar Sangakkara would put on a promising 116-run partnership in 18 overs. Brad Hogg would break the partnership, and from here, Australia would keep chipping away with wickets. In the end, Australia could only manage 215 for 8 in 36 overs when the game came to an end, after playing in complete darkness, a fiasco which I covered in detail in its own video. Regardless, Australia had won the match by 53 runs on Duckworth Lewis, and lifted their 3rd consecutive World Cup.
And that finally is that. Australia have won the World Cup of 2007.
Australia won the 1999 World Cup, having their backs against the wall midway through the tournament, facing elimination. While Australia did win the 2003 World Cup undefeated, there were times where they were in serious trouble, with some close finishes. This 2007 World Cup victory, though, was about as comprehensive as any team could ever ask for. At no point during the tournament did Australia ever look like they were going to lose a match. Australia's complete domination of this World Cup is one of the reasons that it's not remembered that fondly. Australia destroying every opponent kind of made the World Cup boring in a sense. Matthew Hayden was the highest run scorer for Australia, with 659 runs. Ricky Ponting would follow in second place for Australia, with 539 runs. Glenn McGrath was the leading wicket taker, with 26 wickets, and Sean Tate proved to be a good replacement for Brett Lee, as he took 23 wickets in the tournament. That was how Australia won the 2007 Cricket World Cup, and that's how Australia completed a hat-trick of World Cups. From their group stage loss against Pakistan in 1999, Australia would not lose a single game en route to 3 consecutive World Cups. They would not lose a single World Cup game again until 2011, when they lost to Pakistan. A 34-game unbeaten run. Adam Gilchrist, Ricky Ponting, and Glenn McGrath were constants in all 3 of Australia's World Cup wins. Notable One World Cup performances include Shane Warne in 1999, who spun Australia to victories in the knockout games, as well as Brett Lee in 2003, who destroyed opposition with his brutal pace. I made a video about Brett Lee's 2003 World Cup, which I recommend you watch. Captains changed, older players were phased out, new players were brought in, but the one constant was that Australia always won. The quality of players Australia was producing at this time was simply unmatched. So, that was it. That was how Australia won 3 World Cups in a row. I hope you guys found the video entertaining and informative. I had fun making it, but it was a lot of work, so if you did find it entertaining and you got to here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.